Thank you, Emily, and thank you to the Financial Gym. And thank you for being here. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, thank God there is wine here tonight, because that woman is going to stand up there and tell us that we need to be talking to our parents about their finances. I get it. Trust me, I get it. I know these can be very awkward conversations. I mean, they rank right up there with talking to your hot young wife about your erectile dysfunction, or talking to your hot young husband about menopause, or everyone's favorite, having the sex talk with your kids. I am from the South, where, and my friend Lauren's laughing because she knows who that is, I will tell you. I am from the South, where we don't talk about money or sex. When I asked my mom where babies came from, she said to me, well, a man and woman make love. That's it. That was the extent of the conversation. I have 3 kids now, so clearly I figured it out. But when my daughter, who is pictured here, and this is what she gets for using my camera to take weird pictures of herself, when she was 10 and she asked me where babies came from, I didn't give her some vague a man and woman make love response. I decided to just simply give her the basics. So then she looked at me and she said, and remember I have 3 kids, she said, ooh, you did that 3 times? I tell you this story for 2 reasons. I decided early on that I wanted to be upfront with my kids so that these uncomfortable conversations wouldn't seem so uncomfortable, that talking about a topic that most people seem taboo would not be uncomfortable for them. Just like money talks with parents, these conversations are only as awkward as you make them to be. But unlike the birds and the bees talk, you cannot figure out your parents' finances unless you actually get details from them. I learned this the hard way. This is my mom. When I moved back to my home state of Kentucky from Washington, D.C., I suggested to my mother that she look into getting long-term care insurance. She was 60 at the time. She was living on her own because she and my father had gotten divorced. And so I knew that if she ever needed long-term care, a long-term care insurance policy would help pay for it. She took my advice, called an insurance agent, but unfortunately, she could not get coverage. She had a pre-existing health condition, a benign tumor that was behind her left ear, so she was considered too much of a risk. Now, if I had been smart, I would have had a conversation with her then about her finances to figure out how we were going to pay for long-term care if she ever needed it. But I wasn't smart. And I'm almost embarrassed to admit that even though I was and still am a personal finance journalist, I just didn't realize how important it was to have those conversations with her about her finances then. But I'm not the only one who's dropped the ball on this. A survey by Go Banking Rates found that 73% of adult children have not had detailed conversations with their parents about their finances. More than half don't think they need to have these conversations until their parents have already retired, until they're having health issues, until they show signs of needing help, or until they actually ask for help. And 22% said they don't think they will ever have these conversations with their parents about their finances because it's none of their business. If you think these conversations can wait, let me tell you, they cannot. A few years after my mom found out she could not get long-term care coverage, I started noticing that when she would ask questions, she would ask the same question again shortly afterward. At first I thought maybe it was the hearing loss from the tumor, but then one night it became painfully obvious that her hearing loss was not the problem. I was at her house and we were talking and she said, do you want to go out to the patio and see this new bench I bought? So we got up and we looked at the bench, came back in, kept talking, and then a few minutes later she said to me, do you want to see the new bench I got? and my heart sank. I recognized then that I needed to be having conversations with her. But I was afraid, not of talking to her about her finances, but telling her that I needed to have a conversation with her because I could see that she was having problems with her memory. I didn't want to have to be the one to tell her that I could see that she might have dementia. So I stalled. But after a few months, I realized I couldn't keep dragging my feet and I needed to do something. And so I told my mother I thought we should go meet with an attorney to update her will and her living will and her power of attorney. And those latter two documents are especially important. The living will, which is also called an advanced healthcare directive, gave my sister and me the right to make healthcare decisions for her once she was no longer able to on her own. And the power of attorney document gave me and my sister the legal right to make financial decisions for my mother once she was no longer able to on her own. And here's the thing, you have to be mentally competent to sign these documents. So if I had waited any longer to take my mom in to meet with an attorney, the attorney might have found that she was not competent enough to sign them. And that would have meant that I would not have been able to get involved with her finances without having to go through a lengthy and expensive court process to become her conservator and guardian. So if your parents have a stroke, for example, and end up in the hospital and you need to get access to their bank account to pay their bills, and they have not already named you power of attorney and you don't have that document, you're out of luck. You are out of luck. I want that to sink in. If your parents have not already named you power of attorney and something happens to them, you cannot make financial decisions for them. You cannot have access to their finances. A man I interviewed for my book, his name is Doug. His father had not named him power of attorney before he developed Alzheimer's disease. And when Doug's dad ended up in the hospital and then in a nursing home, Doug was not able to pay his father's medical bills for him because he didn't have access to his bank account. And the bank wouldn't talk to him because he was not his power of attorney. So if you wait until an emergency to talk to your parents about their finances, it will probably be too late. They might not have the legal documents that would allow you to step in and start making financial and healthcare decisions for them. You might not have a plan to deal with the emergency. Emotions will be running high, and the last thing any of you will want to talk about is their finances. And it might not be a health issue that forces you to get involved with your parents' finances. They might not have saved enough for retirement, and you might have to help support them. Or they might not have a will. And you're going to have to figure everything out, everything they've left behind, while family members are fighting over who gets what. So as difficult and as awkward as these conversations might seem, the consequences of not having them are far worse. So now that I have sufficiently scared you, you're probably thinking, okay, how do I actually do this? How do I have these conversations without my parents thinking I'm being nosy or greedy, or without making them mad and hurting our relationship? Most likely, if you approach it correctly, they're not going to think any of these things. If you say to them, Mom and Dad, you took such good care of me while I was growing up. I want to be able to take care of you if you ever need it. You might think that your finances are none of my business, but they might be someday if you need my help. And that's why I need some information from you. If you let them know that you are looking out for their best interest, they're not going to get mad at you. They might balk a little bit at the conversation initially, but most likely they are going to open up and share some information with you. So how do you actually do it? So you actually want to start talking to your siblings. You actually want to start talking to your siblings before you even talk to your parents, because you all want to get on the same page. You want to first figure out who's going to initiate the conversation. Is it going to be you? Is it going to be all of you doing it together? Figure out who's going to approach Mom and Dad. You want to figure out what sort of conversation starter you're going to use, how you're going to get the conversation going. You want to figure out when you're going to have the conversation. And let me tell you, the holiday gathering is not the time to have this conversation. Okay? There are going to be family members there who don't need to be part of the conversation. People might be drinking alcohol, and a lot of times there's a lot of stress going on at these situations too. At least wait until the next day. Don't do it during the family meal and say, Mom and Dad, pass the turkey and let's talk about your will. That is not the time to do it. The other thing you want to do when you talk to your siblings is discuss what roles you're willing to play as your parents get older. Maybe you live closest to your parents, so you're going to be the one who can drive them to doctor's appointments or help them out if they need care. Maybe your big sister is better with money, and so she's going to be the one to step up and say, hey, Mom and Dad, if you need a power of attorney, you can name me. I'm that person. By figuring out these things beforehand, you can go to your parents basically as a united front. Mom and Dad, we have been talking. You know, we love you, we care about you, and when they hear that you guys are all, that you have talked about this, that you are in agreement, it's going to make it easier for them. Because a lot of times parents are afraid to talk to their kids about these things because, surprise, parents don't always divide things up equally among their kids in their will, and they don't want their kids to know this. And they certainly don't want to tell them because then the kids are going to start fighting and they're going to get upset. And so if you come to your parents and you say, Mom and Dad, we don't care what we're getting. That's not what matters to us. We just want to make sure you have something in writing. We want to make sure you have these legal documents. We want to let you know that we care about you and we want to have this conversation with you. So start with your siblings before you go to your parents. And then, again, before you talk to your parents, you need to think about what you shouldn't be saying, okay? You don't want to be condescending. Mom and Dad might already be older, they might not be on top of their finances, they might be, giving the scammer their credit card information every time they call, and you feel like you need to let them know everything they're doing wrong. But you can't do that. You have to be respectful. You cannot be condescending because that is going to close the door to conversations. You can't give them any ultimatums. You can't say, well, if you're not going to have this conversation with me, then I'm not going to help you when you get older. Forget it. You better talk to me now or that's it. And you also want to make sure that, well, here we go. There we go. You also want to make sure that you don't have selfish motives. You don't want to make it look like you have selfish motives, that you are trying to talk to them to find out what you're getting. Again, this is all about your parents. And you want to let them know that you are looking out for their best interest, not yours. So keep this in mind before you even try to talk to them, the things you should not be saying, because that's going to stop the conversation really quickly if you are condescending, if you look like you're only thinking about yourself, if you issue them ultimatums. So, how to actually start the conversation? Use a story. I just gave you 2 really good stories that you can use. I told you about my mother and how I should have talked to her sooner about her finances. I told you about Doug, who didn't have power of attorney for his father. Stories are a great way to start these conversations. And the story doesn't necessarily have to be negative. You don't have to talk about this woman who regrets not talking to her mom about her finances before she developed Alzheimer's disease, or a man who had to spend $10,000 going through the court process because his father had not named him power of attorney. You can talk perhaps about a friend whose parent died and had everything in place, who had the estate planning documents, things went smoothly, and Mom and Dad, it was really tough for my friend to lose her mom, but it was so much easier because her mom had updated her on all her financial accounts. She had a will, or she had a living trust. Everything was in place. And so at least she didn't have to worry about the financial aspect of it. Share something positive that happened as a result of someone planning and having these conversations. Stories are a great way to start these conversations. And I'm sure you've got one. You can use mine. You might have a friend who's already taking care of a parent. If If money is a taboo topic in your family, then don't make the conversation about money. Talk about big picture issues. You might want to say to your parents, Mom and Dad, what does retirement look like for you? Or they're already in retirement and you want to say, how's retirement going? And they might say, well, we really wanted to travel, but we haven't been able to. And so then you ask them, well, why not? And they might say, well, we just don't have as much money as we thought. That opens the door to more conversations. If you are young and you're just starting out, ask your parents for advice, because parents love giving advice. And so you come to them and you say, hey, Mom and Dad, I just got married. Do I need a will now? Do I need life insurance? Stephanie O'Connell? Mom and Dad, I just got married. I'm getting married. Do I need these things? And then they're going to let you know by their answer whether they've done them themselves. And again, it can lead to more conversations. A lot of you here come to the financial gym for help. So you can talk about your own financial planning experience. Mom and Dad, I have been meeting with a financial planner, or I recently met with an attorney, and we drafted the will, the power of attorney, the living will, and I want you to know this because I want you to know I have these documents. I want you to know where they are. Have you done this? Or, I have learned so much meeting with a financial planner. I think maybe you should consider it. I know a really good one that you can talk to. Talking about your own experience can open the door to these conversations and make it less awkward. It can seem more natural if you were talking about what you have done and then ask your parents, have you done this too? You can use a life event. A woman I interviewed for my book, a family friend had passed away, and she saw how well things went because this woman had planned so well. She had the legal documents. She had updated her kids on her finances, and so she used that life event to talk to her parents. And she said to her mom and dad, we lost this family friend, but I saw how easy things were for her loved ones who were left behind because they had planned so well. And her parents initially kind of said, wait, what are you trying to talk about this because you want to get rid of us? And she was like, no, not at all, Mom and Dad. I want to know what sort of planning you've done. You have this business, what do you want to happen to it if something were to happen to you? And her parents were reluctant at first, but she got a call a little while later from her parents, and they said, we met with an attorney. We updated our documents. We've named you our power of attorney, and we've named your siblings this, and this is how we're going to divide up the business. So using that life event helped get a conversation going with her parents. If you have a good relationship with your parents, there's nothing wrong about being direct. That's what I did with my mom. Initially, I said, Mom, you should look into long-term care insurance. And then I said, Mom, you should meet with an attorney. I was direct with her. She did not get upset with me because we had a good relationship, and I really feel like if you do have a good relationship with your family and money is not a taboo topic, there's no reason to beat around the bush. You just simply let them know that you want to have this conversation. It doesn't have to happen right now, Mom and Dad, but let's pick a time when we can do it. And you don't need to ask them to give you every financial detail all at once. You can spread it out over several meetings. It doesn't have to happen all at once, because I don't know how many people want to sit around and spend an entire day talking about all of their finances. That's exhausting. That's exhausting even for people who like to talk about money. Okay, so don't do that to them. Plan several meetings with your parents, but there's nothing wrong with taking a direct approach if you have a good relationship with your parents. Okay, so once you get them to start talking to you, what do you need to find out? Start with the basics. At the very least, you need to find out whether your parents have a will or a living trust. You need to find out whether they have a power of attorney and whether they have a living will, which is also called an advanced healthcare directive. As I explained, you have to be mentally competent to sign these documents, and so if they don't have them already, you really need to encourage them to meet with an attorney. And I hear this from people. when I talk to them about this, and they say, my dad will say that he doesn't have a will and he doesn't need one. A lot of times people don't realize how important these documents are. Like, they don't realize that you can't just tell your family members, well, you're going to get this and you're going to get that. You can let your parents know, Mom and Dad, if you don't have a will, the state has one for you. State law will determine who gets what, and it might not be the person you want to get your house or your car or your stocks or whatever you have. And the power of attorney and the living will, not only does it allow you to name someone to make healthcare decisions for you, it lets you spell out what sort of end-of-life medical care you want, whether you want to be on life support. And so you can let your parents know this. Mom and Dad, we don't want to have to make that decision for you. If you have this document where you can spell out your wishes, it's going to make it so much easier for us during a difficult time. And if something were to happen to you and you haven't named one of us or someone else your power of attorney, we can't access your bank account to pay the bills. No bank is going to talk to us and let us do that. They can't. You are their client. The bank has to protect you. They can't just let us have access. So explain to them the importance of these documents. And then if you can, also find out, it doesn't matter how much they have in the bank account, but at least where they bank and how they pay their bills. Because this goes back to the emergency situation. If they're paying their bills by check, and if you're not the power of attorney, if no one is, no one's going to be able to pay those bills for them. At least encourage them to set up automatic bill payment. And this is something you can do to kind of get involved with their finances. Hey, Mom and Dad, let me help you. Let me help you set up automatic bill payment, because it's going to make things so much easier for you. You don't have to worry about paying your bills on time, and then if something happens to you, you know they're going to get paid. Kind of an easy way. You're offering to help them out with something, an easy way to open the door to more conversations. Now, if they're an open book and they're willing to give you more information, then go for it. You want to find out what sources of income they have. Do they have Social Security benefits that they're getting already? Do they have a pension that they're getting? What sort of income do they have now if they're still working or when they retire? You want to find out what sort of insurance policies do they have. Do they have life insurance? Do they have long-term care insurance? You want to find out if they have any debt. You want to find out what sort of investments they have, real estate holdings. The more information you can get, the better. Now, they might not want to tell you this, so you can ask them to put it in writing. It can make it a lot easier. Mom and Dad, you don't have to tell me whether you have debt or what sort of accounts you have, but if you could make a list for me, you could make a list of all your financial accounts, your credit cards, your mortgage, which financial institution holds your mortgage, and if you're willing to give me some passwords, but then just put this information in someplace safe where I can access it and tell me where it is, that's great. Because that can be a lot easier than actually telling you all this information, especially if they're uncomfortable having this conversation. The more information you can get, the better, but at least find out if they have those legal documents, because those are so important. And if you don't have them, it's really going to be a nightmare for you and your family if you have to get involved with their finances. Of course, it's not going to be easy with all parents. I mean, there are going to be some parents, you try a couple of the different conversation starters I've given you, and I've got some more in the book, they're still going to balk. They're still going to say, no, it's none of your business. Then you can try some other things, like getting a third party involved. Maybe you have a family friend. You can ask, hey, please, Susan, can you ask Mom and Dad if they'd be willing to share this information? I know you talked about it with your kids. And if you can tell them how well it worked out for you, they might listen to you. Or you can ask perhaps your parents' attorney or their accountant, or if they have a financial planner or a clergy member. Please, 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 please let my parents know that it would be a good idea for them to have this conversation, because parents don't always want to listen to their kids. They might still see you as that teenager who snuck out at night, not as some 40-something with a successful career. And so sometimes this advice, these suggestions, they're more likely to listen to them if they come from someone else. I don't know, those of you who are in a relationship, you tell your partner, your spouse, honey, I think you should do this. And they don't listen to you. But then when the friend says it, did you know what my friend just told me to do? And you're like, yes, I've been telling you that. Your parents can be the same way. So if you can get a third party involved, they might be more willing to listen. Another thing that you can do, and this is more of a last resort. If your parents just keep refusing to tell you anything, then you can agree on trigger points. Mom and Dad, I understand that you don't want to share this information with me now. Can you give me a couple of scenarios, a couple of situations when you would be willing to share more information with me? What would have to happen? At what point would you be willing to give me this information? At what point, maybe when you start needing help? Or maybe if something happens to Mom and you know that I'm going to have to step in and take care of you. Or if something happens to you and you know that Mom might need some help as she gets older. Let's agree on those, let's put them in writing, and then hang on to that list. So that when those trigger points actually arise, you can go back and say, hey, we agreed to have a conversation now. It's not ideal, but it's sort of a last-ditch effort to get your parents to talk. And then, of course, like I said, you don't have to get them to tell you about their finances, just get them to put it in writing. I have this really nice little, it's actually a big form that you can download and give to your parents so they can fill in all this information. It's on my website at CameronHuddleston.com. And just so you know, if you go and you download it, you're going to get an email that says from WordPress. So don't think it's spam. It's from me. It's this form, and just give it to your parents. And you can tell them, you know what, I filled out one of these. This is where it is. It's in my, my home safe. So that if something happens to me, you have access to it. You can make sure that, you close out my accounts or do what needs to be done or make sure my bills get paid if I'm in an accident. I'd love for you to do the same thing. I'd love for you to fill this out, put it someplace safe, and tell me where it is. Because if you don't know where it is, it's not going to do you any good. Ask them to tell you where it is, update it. Having this information, though, is going to make things so much easier. And if you let them know that by giving you this information, it's going to be easier for you to help them out if they ever need it. Hopefully that's going to sink in. Hopefully you're going to get through to them and they're going to realize how important these conversations are. Now, I'm not going to promise that if you have these conversations, you and your parents are going to be singing and holding hands and saying kumbaya and everything's going to be great. Because for some of you, it's going to be a lot harder. But I really think that as long as you let them know that you are looking out for their best interests and that you want to have these conversations with them because you care about them and you want to be able to help them, then most likely they will talk to you. If they don't give up. Keep trying.